I opened my eyes, staring at the grand altar before me and the crowd below, completely bewildered. Where the hell am I? Am I still in the U.S.? The people below were weeping, their faces streaked with tears. But the moment they saw me stand up, they all froze in stunned silence. What's going on? Is it over? I don't know. Was it successful? Just as I was trying to make sense of it all, a flood of memories rushed into my brain. They belonged to a man named Alexander Thorne, President of the American Republic. This was an era where gods and mortals coexisted. Humanity worshipped the gods, providing them with the power of their faith. In return, the gods were meant to protect the mortal realm with their divine power. But now, the Republic had been without rain for 3 years. The entire nation was gripped by a devastating drought. So, President Thorne decided to perform the rite of sovereignty, a desperate ritual to summon the rain god using his own lifeblood. And that's when I arrived, taking over his body in this world. Which meant the original Alexander Thorne had already made the ultimate sacrifice, completing the rite. The cabinet members and citizens below, however, didn't know this. They were murmuring amongst themselves, confused. I was the only one who looked to the sky, curious to see what this rain god, a being that demanded a president's life as tribute, actually looked like. Sure enough, it didn't take long for the sky to darken. A man in a brilliant white suit materialized, hovering in the void. It was the rain god, Rainer. Who calls upon me? Rainer's voice boomed, laced with an authority that tolerated no argument. As much as I already disliked him, for the sake of the people below, I swallowed my pride and bowed my head slightly. Alexander Thorne, President of the Republic, I have summoned you with the blood of my office, pleading that you grant this land life-giving rain. The people below immediately fell to their knees in unison. We beg you, Divine One, grant us rain. Rainer glanced at me. Then with a grand wave of his hand, the heavens opened and a torrential downpour began. The citizens below erupted in cheers, celebrating the miraculous storm. But the rain hadn't been falling for an hour. No, in their terms, not even half a watch had passed when a radiant, multicolored light appeared in the sky. It was a light so beautiful it took your breath away. The light shimmered and transformed into a celestial woman, also dressed in white. She put her hands on her hips, her tone scolding. Rainer, do you even care about me anymore? I'm upset, and you're not even trying to comfort me. Interrupted, Rainer stopped his spell. He quickly floated over to the woman, wrapping an arm around her waist and cooing softly. Allah, darling, don't be angry. The mortal president summoned me. I'm in the middle of making it rain. The woman, Isla, shoved his hand away. Rain, rain, all you ever think about is rain. Why don't you just go marry the rain? With that, she transformed back into a streak of light and zipped away. The rain stopped. The instant Isla vanished, the tender look on Rainer's face was replaced by pure panic. He didn't even spare a glance for the stunned citizens and officials below who were staring in disbelief at the abruptly clear sky. In a flash, he was gone, chasing after her. Rainer, you divine bastard. I was standing on the altar, my voice trembling with a rage so profound it was almost disbelief, yet it cut through the stunned silence with perfect clarity. Rainer paused, turning to glare at me with extreme annoyance, as if looking at a bug he was about to step on. Mortal President, the rain has fallen. What more do you want? I have urgent matters to attend to. His urgent matter, of course, was chasing the celestial girlfriend who threw a tantrum because he didn't coddle her quickly enough. I looked at him, then at the scene below. The joyous relief on people's faces had not yet faded, only to be replaced by a deeper confusion and terror. The rain had barely dampened the topsoil, not nearly enough to alleviate the drought. Crops were still withered yellow, and riverbeds remained cracked and dry. Hope had lasted for all of 30 minutes before being cruelly snuffed out. My cabinet members were still on their knees, looking at each other, no one daring to speak. A white-hot fury erupted from the pit of my stomach, coursing through my veins. This is what Alexander Thorne gave his life for? For this pair of self-absorbed deities who treated the lives of millions as a trivial backdrop to their romantic spat? Screw the rain god, and screw his tantrum-throwing girlfriend. I took a deep breath, forcing down the curses that were about to spill from my lips. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it carried the undeniable weight of presidential authority. Sir, the rain is not finished. The drought is not broken. Could your personal affairs with your companion perhaps wait until you have fulfilled your duty as the rain god? Rainer looked as if I'd told the funniest joke in the world. He floated there, looking down on me, a sneer twisting his lips. Duty? I answered your summons and provided rain. It's your mortal misfortune that you couldn't keep it. What has that got to do with me? If Isla's feelings are hurt because of your trivialities, can you bear that responsibility? Now, get out of my way. He then dissolved into a wisp of cloud and vanished. Trivialities? The survival of millions was a triviality that was getting in the way of his dating life. I laughed. It was a laugh born of pure, unadulterated rage. These were the gods. They saw the masses as disposable pawns, treating a life-or-death ritual as a cute interruption in their lovers' quarrel. Alexander Thorne's sacrifice was met with contempt and treated like a joke. To hell with the gods. Ding. Host's intense desire to champion the people and resist unjust deities has been detected. Core requirements for system binding have been met. The Supreme Prestige system is now activated. This system is designed to assist the host in building a legacy for the ages. The host can earn prestige points by improving citizens' lives, defending the nation, and earning the genuine support of the people. Prestige points can be exchanged for items from across all universes in the system store. Initial prestige points, 100 activation bonus. Please work hard to earn prestige and bring prosperity to your people. A system, of course, the classic perk of being transported to another world. With a thought, a translucent screen, visible only to me, appeared in my vision. The store was filled with a dazzling array of items, from high-yield seeds, advanced farming equipment, and medical supplies to schematics for all kinds of technology, industrial machinery, and even firam, artillerie, missile. And at the very end, the heart-stopping entry for a nuclear warhead. The required prestige points were followed by a dizzying number of zeros. But right now, I need an immediate solution. My eyes scanned for something I could use right now. Advanced Cloud Seeding Agent. Includes simple launch device and instructions, 50 prestige points. Large water storage tank. Food-grade polymer, 100-ton capacity, 10 prestige points each. Purified drinking water, 20 L containers, 1 prestige point per 10 containers. Cloud Seeding Agent. That's it. It wasn't as flashy as a god waving his hand, but it was the power of science. Reliable power that wouldn't be affected by a lover's quarrel. Redeem. Advanced Cloud Seeding Agent. I commanded in my mind. Redemption successful. 50 prestige points deducted. Remaining prestige, 50. Item has been stored in the system inventory, ready for retrieval. The moment the system notification faded, I felt a strange metal tube and several specialized canisters appear in a sort of mental inventory, along with detailed instructions on how to use them. At that moment, the murmurs and cries of despair from below grew louder. The aging chairman of the Joint Chiefs, his face etched with grief, looked up. Mr. President, the rain god, has heaven forsaken our republic? It has not, I roared, my voice booming over the sounds of weeping and despair. Every eye snapped to me, filled with confusion and a tiny, fragile spark of hope they didn't dare to entertain. I stood on the high altar, my gaze sweeping across the gaunt, desperate faces below. My voice was firm, carrying to every corner of the plaza. The gods are cruel. They see our lives as meaningless. They can cut off life-giving rain for a personal whim, ignoring the suffering of millions of citizens of this republic. But my tone shifted, and I pointed a finger to the sky, my voice ringing with absolute conviction. If they won't do it, I will. If the heavens won't send rain, I will make it rain myself. I am the president of this republic. How can I entrust the fate of our nation and its people to these heartless, selfish gods who care only for their own romantic dramas? The crowd was in an uproar. My cabinet was speechless. Make it rain himself? Had the president lost his mind from the stress? Before they could question me, I retrieved the strangely shaped launcher and a canister marked Cloud Seeding Agent from my system inventory. To everyone else, It looked as if I had pulled it from the deep pockets of my ceremonial coat or a hidden compartment in the altar. This is the Stormcaller, a device passed down from the Founding Fathers. Today, let the high heavens witness the power of humanity's will to survive. I quickly invented a backstory as I loaded the canister, following the instructions in my head. Under a sea of shocked, disbelieving, and confused gazes, I shouldered the launcher and aimed it at the clouds that hadn't fully dispersed. The very clouds Rayner had gathered before he'd left. They weren't very thick, but the seeding agent should still work. "Mr. President, you can't," one of the cabinet members cried out. But I had already pulled the trigger. Whoosh! A specialized rocket shot into the sky, leaving a thin trail of smoke as it soared into the cloud layer. A moment later, a soft thump echoed from high above. It seemed like nothing had happened. Time seemed to freeze. Everyone held their breath, their heads craned toward the sky. Silence. A dead silence. A few seconds passed. The sky remained unchanged. Whispers started to ripple through the crowd below. Doubt and disappointment began to spread again. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs closed his eyes in pain. But then, plink, a single cold drop of water landed on my forehead. Plink, plunk. More and more raindrops began to fall, faster and denser. In the blink of an eye, it became a downpour. Whoosh, a torrential rain, once again descending upon the land. This time, the rain didn't feel like a reluctant gift from an indifferent God. It was heavy, powerful, and relentless. It hammered the ground, kicking up the rich scent of wet earth, quickly filling the cracks in the dry soil, nourishing everything. Zen, it's raining again. It's really raining. The president. Long live the president. Long live the president. Long live the republic. After a moment of stunned shock, an earth-shattering roar of euphoric cheers erupted. The people fell to their knees again, but this time they weren't bowing to some unseen god in the sky. They were bowing to the man on the altar, the one holding a strange device, their president who had wrestled rain from the heavens for them. The rain soaked my suit, but I felt an incredible sense of exhilaration. I lifted my head, letting the water wash over my face, and shot a look at the dutifully raining clouds with a smile that was a mix of scorn and determination. Gods? They're not all that. Ding! The citizens of the capital have shown a massive increase in approval for the host. Prestige points plus 1,000. Ding! First phase of alleviating the Republic's drought successful. Prestige points plus 500. Current prestige points 1,550. Hearing the system's voice in my head, a bold idea began to form. If the gods of this world care so little for humanity, then what do I need them for? I'll just give them all a taste of nuclear fire. Below the altar, thousands bowed, their cheers of "Long live the president," echoing like thunder. The rain soaked their clothes, but couldn't extinguish the rekindled, almost fanatical fire in their eyes. That fire was no longer directed at the heavens, but was fixed on the figure on the altar, their president, Alexander Thorne. Long live the president. All hail the president. The cheers rolled in like waves, each one higher than the last. The rain washed away not just the dust of the drought, but also the deep-seated reverence and dependency on the gods. General Vance, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, staggered to his feet. Rainwater streamed down his white hair as he stared at the Stormcaller in my hands, his expression a complex mixture of shock, elation, and profound awe. "Mr. President, that divine instrument, it can truly command the heavens?" I lowered the launcher, my voice ringing out. "It does not command the heavens. It merely harnesses the power of nature. This is the wisdom of our ancestors and proof of humanity's unyielding spirit. The gods? They feed on our faith but treat our citizens like insects. They abandon their duties for personal whims. Or do they have to sit on high and accept our worship? From this day forward, all official state funding for the temples of the rain god within the Republic is hereby terminated. Their shrines will be closed. Faith is a personal choice, but this government will no longer sponsor such an unworthy deity. We respect the heavens, the fundamental order of the universe, not these negligent bureaucrats who'd rather play games of love." Some of the older, more traditional cabinet members looked worried upon hearing my decree. One tried to advise, Mr. President, angering the gods could bring disaster upon us. My gaze shot toward him like a lightning bolt. Disaster? Was that pathetic excuse for rain not a disaster? A meager blessing that can be snatched away on a whim. That is the greatest disaster. I would rather stand on our own 2 feet than kneel for scraps. If I can bring this life-saving rain today, then tomorrow I can build an era of lasting peace. My legacy will not be written by a bunch of damn soap opera gods. All hail the president. This time, the response was a unified, resolute roar. The contrast was too stark. The indifference of the god versus the decisive action of the president. The choice was clear. The instinct for survival had overpowered the traditional fear of the divine. Ding! To abolish false idols. Embrace self-reliance directive has been issued, significantly shaking the foundations of divine faith. Prestige points plus 2,000. Ding! Earned the extreme devotion of the capital's citizens. Public morale and national destiny have seen a minor boost. Prestige points plus 1,500. Current prestige points, 5,050. The rain continued for a full day and night, thoroughly saturating the land. While more rain was needed to completely end the drought, the seeds of hope had been planted. I immediately ordered the national granaries open to provide relief for the citizens, initiating public works projects to have people dig deeper wells and construct new reservoirs to capture the precious water. I also redeemed a large quantity of high-yield, drought-resistant sweet potato and corn seeds from the system, ordering them to be planted immediately. With this series of rapid-fire actions, the government operated with peak efficiency, and the nation began to recover at a speed beyond anyone's imagination. My prestige points continued to steadily increase. Though my cabinet members were puzzled by my newfound abilities, they kept their questions to themselves. After all, they now shared a common enemy, the gods. The gods' recent neglect of the mortal realm had already caused widespread discontent. The fiasco with the rain was simply the final straw, bringing their indifference out into the open. This thoroughly enraged the populace. Without any orders from me, people began to spontaneously tear down temples and destroy idols, renouncing their faith. And their faith, once directed at the heavens, found a new focal point. Me. I wasn't aware of this shift until the system notified me that the people's belief in me had reached a new, higher level. I didn't object. More faith meant more prestige points. But now we faced an unavoidable problem, war with the gods. According to the rules of this world, the gods derive their power from mortal faith. A sudden cutoff of their primary energy source would undoubtedly lead them to come demanding answers. So, we had to prepare for war. 6 months later, I was in the Oval Office discussing the production of a steam engine with Secretary of Infrastructure, Franklin Cole. Secretary Cole, take these blueprints. I need your department to manufacture this as quickly as possible. This is the key to taking our nation to the next level. Yes, Mr. Press. Before he could finish, a commanding, furious roar echoed from outside the White House. Alexander Thorne, present yourself before the divine at once. Hearing that voice, I knew the gods had come to settle the score. It took them 6 months to notice the faith shortage. They must have had quite a reserve stockpiled. I quickly pulled a small radio from my pocket and spoke into it. They're here. Prepare for action. Then I slipped the radio back into my pocket. I wasn't entirely sure how these communication systems worked without satellites or broadcast towers in this world, but strangely, they just did. I figured the system itself was probably acting as a satellite and left it at that. Stepping outside, I saw the sky was filled with dark, roiling clouds. 2 figures hovered above. One was the rain god who had abandoned us 6 months ago. The other I hadn't seen before, but my predecessor's memories identified him as the emissary, a divine messenger. Alexander Thorne. Raynor spotted me and immediately bellowed. You dare blaspheme against the gods, destroy my temples, and cut off my faith. Who gave you the audacity? The emissary stepped forward, his voice grand and cold, devoid of any emotion, like the voice of law itself. President Alexander Thorne, your actions have violated the Celestial Compact. You are to immediately restore the worship of all gods, rebuild their temples, and repent with piety. Otherwise, divine retribution will befall you. Your nation will be turned to ash, and your people will be enslaved for eternity." His words carried a psychic pressure that bore down on my mind. The old Alexander Thorne would have likely crumbled. The members of my cabinet gathered at the entrance, their faces pale with fear, yet no one knelt. Their faith had already been shattered by that farce of a rainstorm and my subsequent actions. I walked step by step out of the office and onto the grand portico, looking up at the two gods with a faint, mocking smile. "Faith!" My voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly to everyone holding their breath. "Is faith something you can demand? Is it something you can get through threats and intimidation? Rainer, I summoned you with my own lifeblood, and you abandoned millions to their fate so you could chase after a celestial fling. You treated a sacred right like a joke and the lives of my people as nothing. A being of your character dares to demand my people's worship. And you, emissary," my gaze shifted to the messenger. "You speak of laws and retribution. You gods accept our offerings, but fail to provide protection. When we suffered 3 years of drought and countless deaths, where were you? Only when your source of power is cut off do you come demanding answers. What have you done to earn our respect? Where is your honor?" My questions were like swords, tearing away the gods' hypocritical facade. The faces of Rainer and the emissary turned ugly. They had clearly never been challenged and questioned like this by a mortal. "Insolence!" Rainer roared, and the dark clouds swirled as lightning crackled within them. "A mere mortal dares to judge the divine. I will ask you one last time. Will you submit or not?" I let out a cold laugh. "Submit? Submit my ass." To the astonishment of everyone, including the two gods, I suddenly raised my arm. In the next instant, a 6-foot-long, olive-drab tube of steel and composite material appeared on my shoulder. The cold, metallic sheen of the weapon was menacing under the dim sky, its conical warhead aimed directly at the gods above. M202 Flash Thermobaric Rocket Launcher includes 1X rocket 800 prestige points. Rainer and the emissary's eyes showed a flicker of confusion. They had never seen such a bizarre object. It had no magical fluctuations, yet it radiated an unsettling aura of danger. "Tricks!" Rainer sneered, raising his hand to summon a bolt of lightning. "Tricks!" I grinned fiercely and, without hesitation, pulled the trigger. "I'll send you to hell with a trick." Whoosh! The back of the rocket launcher erupted in a blaze of fire and thick smoke. The rocket screamed through the air, moving far faster than any arrow or magical spell, streaking directly toward Rainer and the emissary. It was too fast, so fast that the two gods couldn't fully react in time. "How dare you!" the emissary shouted, conjuring a golden shield of light in front of him. Rainer reflexively threw up a barrier of water. Boom! The rocket slammed into the golden shield and detonated. But this explosion wasn't a simple blast of shrapnel and force. It was a near-instantaneous release of a highly pressurized, terrifying fuel-air cloud, which then ignited in a secondary, far more powerful blast. A massive fireball erupted in midair, completely engulfing the two gods. The terrifying shockwave spread out like a physical entity, tearing the dark clouds apart and even rattling the tiles on the White House roof below. From within the inferno came Rainer's pained and furious cry, along with a muffled grunt from the emissary. They weren't killed outright. The resilience of their divine bodies was incredible. But the devastating overpressure, oxygen deprivation, and instantaneous high temperature of the thermobaric explosion had hit them hard. When the fire dissipated, the two gods reappeared, looking disheveled. Rainer's white suit was scorched in several places, his hair was a mess, and his face was a mask of disbelief and intense pain. The golden aura around the emissary had dimmed considerably, and the hand holding his ceremonial tablet was trembling slightly. For the first time, his stoic face showed shock and a hint of terror. They could have racked their brains for an eternity and never figured out how an object with no magical energy could have possibly harmed them. You mortal! You dare! You can! Rainer's hand, pointing at me, was shaking, whether from anger or pain, I couldn't tell. I slowly lowered the smoking launcher. So, I sneered, how do you like a taste of my truth? Want another? The two gods in the sky stared down, their expressions shifting from outrage to suspicion and then to a deep-seated wariness. They glared at me and the strange iron tube on my shoulder, and for a moment they didn't dare to advance. On the ground, after a dead silence, an earth-shattering cheer erupted. The president is mighty. He hurt them. The president hurt the gods. All their fear, in that one moment, transformed into a fervent desire for battle and unshakable faith. Ding! Divine authority has been severely damaged. Human morale has been greatly boosted. Prestige points plus 3,000. Ding! Effective damage dealt to divine beings, opening a new era of human-god conflict. Prestige points plus 5,000. Current prestige points, 6,025,089. Hearing the system's notifications and seeing the bewildered gods in the sky, the smile on my face grew wider. Mortal, I will see you dead. Seeing the cheers from below, Raynor seemed to take it as a profound insult. Droplets of water began to coalesce behind him as he prepared to attack. But just then, a platoon of soldiers in modern tactical gear ran out from the White House. Each one was carrying a rocket launcher. They quickly took a knee, shouldered their weapons, and assumed a firing stance. Ever since the incident with the rain god, I knew a war with the gods was inevitable. I had spent the last several months redeeming modern weaponry from the system, and had used that time to forge a modern special forces unit. This was just a fraction of them. Seeing this, Raynor hastily conjured a defensive water shield. The emissary also put up his guard. They had just experienced the power of these weapons and knew they were incredibly fast. The emissary frowned. Alexander Thorne, what is the meaning of this? I just shrugged. It means what it looks like. Are you truly declaring war on the divine? Have you considered the consequences? The emissary threatened. Consequences? I shot back. For years, we have worshipped you. And what have you given us in return? 32 years into the unification era, the Shadow King invaded the mortal realm, slaughtering our people. My predecessor begged the warlord to intervene, but there was no answer. In the end, my predecessor had to sacrifice his own life to a demonic sword just to slay him. In the third year of the Everbright period, a massive earthquake struck the Western Protectorate, a region supposedly guarded by the Earth Warden, causing immense death and destruction among my people. 10 years into that same period, a Leviathan appeared in the Great River, causing the banks to burst and drowning countless citizens in the flood. The river god arrived, did nothing to stop it, and just watched as the monster massacred my people. I have a list of grievances, each one worse than the last. Do you need me to continue? I stared at the emissary, my eyes blazing with fury. Although I wasn't from this world, I had all of the former president's memories, and the horrific images that flooded my mind filled me with an empathetic rage. Silence, the emissary roared, cutting me off. The shock on his face was replaced by a mixture of arrogance and a you just don't understand kind of anger. Alexander Thorne, you are a mere mortal who sees only the surface. How can you comprehend the profound will of heaven, the complexities of divine actions? The events you speak of are not as simple as you believe. During the unification era, the warlord did not intervene because the Shadow King's daughter, whom he loved, had died unexpectedly. The Shadow King's rampage was one of grief. The warlord felt guilty and thus did not stop him. In the third year of the Everbright period, the Earth Warden's beloved mortal woman was dying. He sacrificed his own divine core to save her, leaving him too weak to stabilize the Earth. And the Leviathan that appeared 10 years later was the reincarnation of the river god's lost love, who had drowned herself in that very river. The river god already felt responsible for her death. How could he bring himself to harm her again? Raynor, having regained his composure, added with renewed arrogance, mortals have short lifespans and shallow emotions. How can you possibly understand the tangled affections we gods experience over our eternal lives? Those sacrifices, those helpless situations, it was all fated. Your people suffered, which is unfortunate, but to be a part of a god's tragic love story is also their destiny. I just stood there silent, not because I was speechless, but because the sheer absurdity and rage of it all had nearly overwhelmed my sanity. For a moment, I couldn't find the words to describe the shamelessness of these beings. I thought they were just negligent. I thought they were just arrogant. I never imagined they could come up with such creative, self-righteous excuses. So, all this time, the survival of billions of human beings, the blood and tears of my people, were nothing more than an insignificant backdrop to their trashy divine soap operas, just collateral damage from their emotional breakdowns. He couldn't save people because he was grounded for his relationship drama. An earthquake happened because he was too broken up over his dying girlfriend to do his job. He just watched a monster rampage because it used to be his ex, and he couldn't bear to hurt her feelings. And they dared to call it destiny? They dared to call it a tragic love story? To hell with your tragic love stories. I slowly lifted my head, the muscles in my face twitching with suppressed fury, but my eyes were as cold as ancient ice. I began to clap, slowly. Clap, clap, clap. The sharp sound was jarring in the tense silence of the plaza. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. My voice was terrifyingly calm, each word forced through gritted teeth. Such profound love, such tragic helplessness, such utter, complete, and total bullshit. The faces of the emissary and Rainer darkened instantly. So, according to you, my people deserve to have their families torn apart and their homes destroyed, all to serve as extras in your God's epic love stories. Their lives aren't lives. Their suffering is just a footnote in your emotional memoirs. My voice suddenly thundered. What a load of sanctimonious crap. You enjoy the worship of the mortal realm. You draw power from our faith, yet you place your petty, melodramatic love lives above your duty to protect us. This isn't a tragic romance. This is shameless dereliction of duty. It is the ultimate injustice. You talk about destiny? Today, I will show you what destiny is. I thrust my arm out, pointing at the dozens of Special Forces soldiers behind me, my voice ironclad and echoing across the sky. Their destiny is my responsibility. It is not for you love-addled gods to decide. You gods are unworthy of your positions. So, get the hell out of my sky. The instant the words left my mouth, the launcher on my shoulder once again spat fire. At the same time, the dozens of loyal soldiers behind me, without a moment's hesitation, all pulled their triggers. Fwoosh, fwoosh, fwoosh. Dozens of thermobaric rockets, trailing tails of fire and death, shot into the air like a swarm of vengeful hornets, blanketing the sky and soaring toward the two gods, who were still stunned by this mortal's blasphemous rage. This was no longer a warning. This was war. When the thick smoke in the sky cleared, two battered figures were revealed. I stared at them, momentarily surprised. I hadn't expected their bodies to be so durable as to survive that barrage. Mortal President. The emissary's voice was thick with suppressed rage and a faint, almost imperceptible weakness. You have indeed exceeded our expectations. But do you truly believe you can slay a god with these strange toys? The power of the Empyrean is beyond your comprehension. Rainer was practically screaming. When we return to the Empyrean and report this to the architect, he will lead the celestial armies to wipe your insolent nation from existence. You and your ridiculous tin cans will be reduced to dust. Return to the Empyrean? Report to the architect? Perfect. That was exactly what I wanted. Is that so? I smiled, and with lightning speed, I whipped a small pistol out of my pocket and fired a single shot at Rainer. Crack! The bullet struck him, and he let out a pained grunt. You mortals! Just you wait. After spitting out one last threat, the two of them hastily fled, vanishing from sight. As the two gods disappeared over the horizon in a panicked retreat, the White House grounds fell into a brief, stunned silence, which was immediately shattered by a deafening roar of celebration. The president is divine. We won. We drove back the gods. Long live the president. Long live the republic. The soldiers excitedly lowered their rocket launchers, clapping each other on the back. The cabinet members were weeping with joy. The fear of the gods that had loomed over them for so long was shattered in an instant, replaced by boundless admiration and fervent loyalty for the young president before them. The exhilarating joy of survival filled the air as everyone reveled in the monumental shock and pride of having repelled gods with mortal hands. However, amidst the celebration, old General Vance's brow was deeply furrowed. There was no joy on his face, only profound worry. He hurried through the cheering crowd to my side, offered a deep bow, and spoke in a low, urgent voice. "Mr. President, sir, I don't understand. Since you possess the power to harm the gods, why didn't you use everything at your disposal to finish them off? Letting them escape like this will surely lead to endless trouble. If, as Raynor said, the architect of the Empyrean is enraged and sends his celestial armies, how can our republic possibly defend itself?" His concern was entirely logical. Several other senior officials overheard him, and the joy on their faces faded, replaced by the same worried expressions. I looked at the old general's anxious face, but didn't answer directly. I simply raised a hand to quiet the crowd. My gaze was fixed on the horizon where the two gods had disappeared, a knowing, inscrutable smile playing on my lips. "General," my voice was surprisingly calm, a stark contrast to the surrounding fervor. "Don't be hasty." I paused, letting him and the other cabinet members stare at me in confusion, before slowly uttering 5 words. "Let the bullet fly a while." The general was utterly baffled. So were the other officials who heard me. They had no idea what I meant by that cryptic statement. Ignoring their confusion, I calmly reached into the pocket of my coat, in reality, my system inventory, and took out a palm-sized, glowing device, a GPS tracker. That last bullet wasn't just any bullet. It was a tracking round. It would show me the exact location of the Empyrean. On the screen, 2 flashing dots were moving at high speed, tracing a clear path towards some distant, unknown point. Everyone's attention was drawn to this suddenly appearing, glowing little mirror. They held their breath and watched. Though they didn't understand what it was, their instincts told them the president was about to do something extraordinary again. The minutes ticked by. The cheering in the plaza gradually subsided as the tense atmosphere around me spread. Everyone watched me and the strange object in my hand with anxious anticipation. Finally, the 2 dots on the screen stopped moving, solidifying into 2 stable red markers at a fixed location. A string of strange coordinates appear beside them. "There we go," I said softly, breaking the silence. "It's arrived." As the general and the others stared in ever-deepening confusion, I put away the tracker. Then, I slowly closed my eyes and sank my consciousness into the system. The system's interface unfolded in my mind, and I quickly found what I was looking for. Project Retribution Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, equipped with 2 variable-yield thermonuclear warheads, includes precision guidance and unrestricted launch service, 2 million prestige points. Confirm coordinates. Select launch. Prestige points deducted. Launch command confirmed. Project Retribution. Special delivery. Mission guaranteed. A few minutes passed. I remained with my eyes closed, hands clasped behind my back. Suddenly, I opened my eyes and looked toward the distant sky. Though I couldn't see anything, I could feel the system notification arriving. Ding! Successfully eliminated countless celestial soldiers. Divine authority has been critically damaged. Prestige points plus 10 million. Ding! A subversive impact has been dealt to the current world's system of divine faith. Prestige points plus 20 million. Ding! Warning! Your actions have attracted the attention of the highest echelons of the Empyrean. A response is imminent. The host is advised to increase strength and consolidate power as soon as possible. Hearing the system's notifications, my heart surged with elation. I hadn't expected the system to be so generous, 10 million prestige points right off the bat. But made sense. If just injuring Raynor had earned me 5,000, then annihilating countless celestial beings would naturally yield an astronomical reward, even if they were just the lowest-ranking grunts in the Empyrean. With these prestige points, I could build an army truly capable of taking on the gods. I clapped the general on the shoulder. "All right, they've received my gift. Now, prepare for a fight to the death with the gods. Go and summon the commanders of the Aegis Corps. I need to brief them." Though still bewildered, the general simply nodded. "Yes, Mr. President." An hour later, in a heavily guarded briefing room deep within the White House, bright lights illuminated the faces of a dozen resolute, battle-hardened individuals. They were the corps commanders of the Aegis Corps, elites handpicked from the military's best units, law enforcement, and even civilian specialists, then personally trained by me using system-redeemed modern training manuals and select enhancement serums. They had not only mastered the combat disciplines of this world, but were also proficient in small unit tactics, advanced weaponry, and intelligence analysis. They were the sharp edge of the spear forged specifically to fight the gods. I stood with my hands behind my back, my gaze passing over each commander. Among them were ambitious young officers and seasoned veterans. But right now, the same fire burned in all their eyes. It was a fire of determination and zeal, forged from fear, despair, and now, the defiant taste of victory. Commanders, I began, my voice quiet but imbued with an authority that silenced all other sound in the room. A short while ago, I delivered a small parting gift to those two divine envoys in their home base. I paused, seeing their eyes light up and their breathing hitch. The results were satisfactory. At the very least, for the time being, the so-called higher-ups in the Empyrean won't have the time or the nerve to send any more envoys or celestial armies to bother me. However, my tone sharpened, turning icy. This is not victory, and it is certainly not the end. On the contrary, this marks the true beginning of the war. The gods are arrogant, but they are not stupid. After this direct assault failed, they will inevitably change their tactics. I walked over to a massive digital map of the American Republic, my finger tapping several key locations. Their next move will most likely be. My finger slid across the map. Asymmetric attacks, no longer focusing on me or the capital, but using their individual power and strange abilities to infiltrate deep into our heartland. They will attack our granaries, our dams and reservoirs, our factories. They will slaughter our citizens to create panic and undermine our nation from within. Their goal is to make us unable to respond, to shatter our will to resist from the inside out. The commanders' faces grew grim. They understood the scenario all too well. The gods were powerful individuals. If they split up to carry out guerrilla-style attacks, they would be incredibly difficult to defend against. And that, commanders of the Aegis Corps, is where your mission begins. I spun around, my gaze like lightning. I want you, starting immediately, to deploy your battalions to every state and major city in the nation. I am granting you full operational autonomy, including the authority to act decisively without prior approval. You have 3 objectives. First, defend. Coordinate with local military garrisons and government agencies to guard critical infrastructure, granaries, dams, factories, mines, and major transportation hubs. I will equip you with the latest communication gear and early warning sensors, redeemed from a system. The moment you detect a divine signature or anomalous energy fluctuations, you issue an alert and converge to eliminate the threat. Second, purge. There may still be lingering cults, fanatics who would collaborate with the gods, or even beasts and monsters swayed by their influence. I want you to root them out, tear them up from the ground, and show no mercy. Third, and most important, stabilize. Reassure our people. Let them know the government is here, am here, and the Aegis Corps is here. The sky will not fall. Anyone who dares to cause chaos, whether they are a god or a demon, I will see them destroyed. I took a deep breath, my voice filled with unshakable resolve. This will be a nationwide war with no fixed front lines. You may find yourselves isolated, facing gods far more powerful than you are. Are you afraid? We will die for the president. We will protect our land and slay the false gods. The commanders dropped to one knee, their unified roar shaking the room. There was no fear in their eyes, only boiling fighting spirit and absolute determination. Good. I nodded in satisfaction. Remember, you are not fighting alone. You have the most advanced individual equipment of this era, a communication network to support each other, and the backing of billions of citizens who yearn for peace. And I will be your strongest shield. Detailed deployment plans and equipment manifests will be distributed by the Chief of Staff shortly. Once you have your gear, move out immediately. Yes, sir. The commanders roared in unison. They rose and filed out of the room with disciplined speed. Soon, the sounds of marching feet, rolling tires, and a unique hum of vehicle engines filled the air. This hybrid army, part ancient resolve and part modern might, was heading to the front lines. General Vance approached me then, his voice filled with awe and a slight tremor. "Mr. President, sir, only today have I truly understood the meaning of leadership and the saying, 'Man can conquer heaven.'" I looked at him and smiled, a smile that held an icy, killing intent. "General, this is just the beginning. The gods have enjoyed our worship for too long. They've forgotten who the true masters of this world are. And since they've forgotten, I will remind them in a language they can understand." I walked to the door, looking out at the first light of dawn and the steel convoy that was leaving the capital, melting into the morning mist. "Issue the order. All munitions factories are to operate on a 24/7 schedule, producing new weapons and ammunition at maximum capacity. The science division is to accelerate their work on reverse engineering the new technologies. We need our own industrial base. Issue a national call for talent. I want the best and brightest from all over the country. Regardless of their background, anyone with skills useful for fighting gods or any unique talent will be welcomed. And tell the people in every corner of this republic that my nuclear arsenal, ahem, my presidential sword of justice, can not only obliterate love-addled gods, but can also annihilate any enemy who dares to invade our land or harm our citizens. Let the Empyrean think long and hard about what's more important, their petty dramas or facing the full, righteous fury of humanity." The wheels of war were turning. This was a total rebellion of mortals against gods. And I, Alexander Thorne, a soul from another world, president of this republic, armed with a system and the faith of billions, would stand at the forefront of this new era. Gods, they were just ancient beings who had lived a little too long. It was time for them to be retired. Just as I predicted, the gods began a campaign of vicious retaliation. They avoided a direct confrontation with the capital and instead, as I had foreseen, broke into smaller groups and began attacking critical infrastructure across the various states, attempting to force us into submission. But the troops I had deployed did not disappoint. Despite taking some losses, they held the line and prevented the gods from shaking our foundation. During morning briefing, I looked at the battle reports with elation. Excellent. These are the soldiers of our republic, unafraid of any enemy, no matter how powerful. The cabinet members below were equally energized. Congratulations, Mr. President. Seeing that their guerrilla tactics were failing, the gods changed their strategy. They stopped attacking in person and instead began to summon natural disasters to assault the mortal realm. Floods, blizzards, earthquakes, hurricanes. A century's worth of catastrophic events erupted across the country in a short span of time. Although I had system resources to aid in disaster relief, I simply couldn't respond fast enough to all of them at once. That made me furious. Fina, you want to play dirty? You want to use natural disasters? I'll show you a disaster. My own prestige points were plentiful, almost more than I could spend. So, every day, on a strict schedule, I launched a variety of missiles at the Empyrean. One conventional missile a day, one nuclear missile every 5 days. Warheads with nuclear payloads, warheads without. The strategy was simple: bomb the hell out of them. Even if the missiles couldn't kill the major gods outright, they could definitely make them hurt. This went on for over a month. Then, the gods stopped their disaster-based attacks and returned to the battlefield. I figured they couldn't take the constant bombardment anymore. I stopped the missile strikes as well. The month of bombing had been satisfying, but my prestige points couldn't sustain that level of expenditure. Conventional missiles were one thing, but nukes were seriously expensive. Although my points were constantly replenishing, the outflow was far greater than the income. I was just about to consider a different method of retaliation when they broke first. After that, the battlefield situation became much easier for us. With our modern weaponry, we went from barely holding our own to fighting on equal footing, and then, gradually, we began to gain the upper hand. Though there were still wins and losses on both sides, any discerning observer could see that the scales of victory were tipping in our favor. With their source of faith severed, the gods' power would only continue to weaken. Victory was just a matter of time. The news that a peace delegation from the Empyrean had arrived spread through the capital like a gust of wind. The city had just weathered a minor divine incursion, and its people showed neither excessive curiosity nor panic. They simply quickened their pace on their way home from work, pulling their children indoors. The relentless war had tempered the nerves of the capital. Be it a god descending or a monster attacking, nothing caused much of stir anymore, unless the president was rolling out some new, world-shaking invention. Inside the White House, the atmosphere in the Grand Hall was tense and somber. Led by the emissary, a few gods in tattered robes, their expressions withered, were escorted in by a squad of elite Aegis Corps soldiers. They had lost all of their former arrogance and radiance, replaced now by forced dignity and an unmistakable weakness. Most strikingly, Raynor was bound tightly by chains of divine energy, kneeling at the front of the group. His head was bowed, his long hair obscuring his face, but his once pristine white suit was now filthy and stained with the dried, strangely colored blood of gods. His divine light was almost completely extinguished. The emissary took a deep breath, stepped forward, and bowed deeply to me on my seat of power, a gesture of unprecedented humility for a god. President Thorne, his voice was hoarse, having lost its former grandeur. This continued conflict benefits neither of our peoples. The Empyrean wishes for an end to this war. He paused, seemingly fighting to suppress his humiliation, and gestured to Raynor and several other bound gods who looked either terrified or resentful. This is Raynor, and these are the others, who, for personal reasons, neglected their duties and brought disaster upon the mortal realm. Today we have brought them here to be delivered into your hands. Whether you choose to execute them or torture them, it is entirely your decision. His words echoed through the silent hall. My cabinet members remained expressionless, their eyes cold as they stared at the beings they once had to revere. The Aegis soldiers tightened their grips on their new assault rifles, their barrels aimed low, locked on every god to ensure any sudden move would be met with a hail of bullets. The emissary continued, his tone now bordering on a plea. All the Empyrean asks is that you cease hostilities, allow some temples to be reopened, and restore a small flow of faith. From this day forward, the divine and mortal realms will be separate, each governing its own affairs, and we shall enjoy eternal peace. We hope you will grant this. With that, he bowed deeply once more. The hall was silent, save for the sound of wind whipping against the flags outside. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers drumming lightly on the armrest. My gaze swept over Raynor's pathetic form, over the other unfamiliar, but presumably also love-addled gods, and finally rested on the emissary's tense, composed face. I spoke slowly, my voice soft, but laced with a piercing sarcasm. Oh, a commendable show of sincerity. You've even made a neat little list. The one who caused the floods, the one responsible for the earthquake, the one behind the drought. It seems they are all getting what they deserve. Hearing this, the emissary seemed to relax slightly. However, my tone sharpened abruptly, my voice rising with an undeniable question. But aren't you missing one? The emissary's body went rigid. I leaned forward, my gaze like a sword stabbing into him as I enunciated each word. What about your warlord? The one who, because of his own heartbreak, stood by and watched the Shadow King slaughter 1 million of my people across 3 states and 16 counties? Where is Kale? Where is he? The final words were a thunderclap, imbued with the full weight of presidential authority and long-simmering rage, making the entire hall vibrate. The emissary snapped his head up, his carefully constructed composure shattering, leaving only panic and the flustered look of a man whose scheme had been exposed. His lips trembled. The warlord. He guards the borders of the Empyrean. His duties are critical. He truly cannot. Cannot what? I interrupted with a sneer. Cannot be spared because he's the last real fighter you have left? The only one who could go toe-to-toe with 3 of my armor divisions. So you're not willing to give him up? Is that it? You use these half-dead scapegoats to appease me, hoping to trade them for a sliver of faith so your warlord can recover and plot a comeback? Emissary, you gods have lived for eons. Have you spent all that time rotting your brains with sappy romances? Or do you think my brain is as addled as yours? My words were a profound insult. A few suppressed chuckles could even be heard from the cabinet members. The bound gods turned pale. They thought they were being offered up for atonement. They never imagined that in the eyes of their leaders, they were just disposable pawns, sent to probe and delay. The emissary's face was ashen. He knew his plan had been completely exposed. His offer of peace was a lie. He was just buying time. Surrender the warlord? That was absolutely out of the question. He was the Empyrean's last pillar of strength, their only hope of holding out and perhaps even counterattacking. Mr. President, the emissary started, trying one last time, but I had run out of patience. Enough, I commanded with a sharp wave of my hand. Peace talks? Fine. I have one condition. Hand over the warlord, along with every other god who, directly or indirectly, caused disaster in the mortal realm through their selfish negligence. They will be publicly tried and sentenced to appease the souls of the countless innocent citizens of this republic who died because of them. Otherwise, I stood up, radiating a chilling, killing intent. I will come to the Empyrean and escort him here myself. As for faith, once I've cleansed this world of you arrogant, indifferent, so-called gods, humanity will have faith in itself. Faith in science, faith in the future. What need will we have for any of you? The emissary staggered back as if struck by lightning. He knew the negotiations were over. He glanced at Raynor and the others, a complex emotion flashing in his eyes before it hardened into resolve. Since he couldn't take them back, he couldn't leave them as bargaining chips for the mortals either. A faint divine light began to glow around him as he prepared to activate some secret art to either kill the captive gods or teleport them away. However, runes carved into the walls of the hall instantly lit up, generating a powerful energy interference field. At the same moment, the Aegis soldiers opened fire. A storm of specialized anti-magic bullets rained down on the emissary and his divine guards, instantly shattering their already dim shields of divine energy. The guards cried out as they dissolved into motes of light. The emissary was riddled with shots, smoke rising from his body as he collapsed to his knees, his attempt at a secret art forcibly snuffed out. You're in my house, and you still try to pull tricks. I snorted. Seize them all. Let none escape. The Aegis soldiers swarmed forward like wolves, clapping special shackles on the emissary and pinning him to the ground alongside Raynor and the other gods. The emissary roared in despair. Alexander Thorne, must you be so aggressive? Are you willing to risk mutual destruction? The warlord will never forgive you. The Empyrean will never yield. The fish will die, but the net might not break, I said, walking down from my seat of power to stand before the prisoners. I looked down at them. As for the warlord, I'll be paying him a visit soon enough. But for now, we start with you. I waved my hand. My tone is indifferent, as if ordering the disposal of trash. Take them to the execution ground 1 outside the capital. Announce it to the entire city. I'm going to hold a public god-slaying. Let the whole world see what happens to those who are indifferent to life and treat the world as their personal playground. Execution Ground 1, on the outskirts of the capital, was packed with a massive, silent crowd. News had spread, and citizens had flocked from all corners. They stood in silence, their eyes fixed on the dozen or so figures chained to pillars of a special alloy in the center of the field. There they saw the rain god they once had to beg for mercy, the earth warden who controlled the land, the river god who commanded the waters, and the high and mighty emissary of the Empyrean. There were no cheers, no curses, only a silence that had been building for far too long, a silence that concealed a volcano on the verge of eruption. I stood on a high platform, holding a megaphone, my voice booming across the field. Citizens of the Republic, today, we are not here to perform a ritual. We are not here to beg for blessings. Today, we are here to execute justice, to pass judgment on the guilty. My finger pointed at Raynor. This god enjoyed our faith, yet because of a spat with his celestial girlfriend, he cut off the rain, treating the lives of millions as worthless. My finger swept across the other gods. These gods, whether for love or for spite, neglected their duties, causing our lands to shatter and our families to be broken. Their crimes are unforgivable, their debts written in blood. They, and the other gods who have yet to face justice, once thought their love was more important than anything else. They once thought mortal suffering was just a decorative detail in their tragic romances. Today, I will tell them, in a language they can understand. My voice turned impossibly cold, filled with the unyielding finality of iron and blood. Their love is worthless. Their tears are not worth a single drop of my people's blood. Any who harm this republic, any who harm my citizens, I don't care if you're a man or God, I will hunt you down and destroy you. Execute. At my command, a dozen modified heavy-caliber sniper cannons, manned by Aegis Corps soldiers, were brought to bear from the perimeter of the field. The dark muzzles aimed at the heads or hearts of the condemned gods. The gods finally showed true primal fear. Some struggled violently. Some whimpered pleas for mercy. Others simply screamed in broken hysterics. Raynor lifted his head to look at me, his eyes filled with venom and disbelief, as if he wanted to say something. But I gave him no chance. My face was a mask of stone as I swung my right hand down. Boom! 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 A dozen muffled, thunderous reports echoed simultaneously. Specialized high-explosive, armor-piercing rounds, traveling at several times the speed of sound, slammed into the body of each god. I didn't know if these rounds could truly kill a god, but they were the most powerful single-target weapons I had. The next moment, thump, 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 a series of dull, internal explosions sounded from within the gods' bodies. They stiffened, their eyes bulging as their divine energy raged out of control before rapidly dimming and dying out like a puncture balloon. Then their divine bodies began to break down from the inside. Blinding cracks appeared under their skin until, after one final, violent convulsion, they collapsed into heaps of lusterless, charcoal-like matter, still chained to the pillars. The wind blew, and ashes drifted away. Silence. A dead silence. And then, long live the president. Long live the republic. An earth-shattering wave of cries, cheers, and roars erupted like a tidal wave. Countless people fell to their knees, weeping uncontrollably, not from sadness, but from the cathartic release of centuries of humiliation, pain, and despair. A look of triumph crossed my face. It seemed these gods were not so immortal after all. If high-explosive rounds could kill them in their weakened state, then it was time for a counterattack. Ding! Congratulations to the host for successfully slaying gods and altering the course of the war. Reward: 3,400,000 prestige points. The system's message solidified my confidence. A month passed in the blink of an eye. During that month, the Republic's war machine operated with unprecedented speed and efficiency. Factories across the nation worked around the clock, churning out weapons and ammunition of every kind. The Science Division worked tirelessly to digest the technical data I had redeemed from the system. While it was too short a time to master everything, imitation and initial application had already begun. Most importantly, we focused on personnel selection and training. The Aegis Corps expanded dramatically. I recruited elites from the entire military, from civilian life, and even from the old martial orders. Though their original training varied, they were all armed with a unified modern military doctrine and the latest equipment. I had already planned for pilot training. The system store provided not just weapons, but also accompanying flight simulators and detailed instruction manuals. Years ago, when I had first stabilized my position and began redeeming basic aircraft, I had secretly selected a group of sharp, resilient young men and women for a Skyrider program, training them in simulators. A few years was enough to turn these already talented individuals into competent pilots. The people of this world, having been subtly influenced by ambient divine energy for generations, naturally had better physical coordination and learning abilities than an average modern human. Combined with the high-fidelity simulators and my willingness to spend whatever it took, achieving initial combat readiness in a few years was not impossible. Now, the time was right. On a massive military field outside the capital, the air was thick with the promise of battle. Below, rows of perfectly aligned and well-equipped ground troops stood ready. They wore specialized composite armor, held assault rifles, and their eyes were sharp with killing intent. Behind them stood self-propelled artillery, missile launch vehicles, and other heavy equipment. Hovering in the air above was the main force of this counteroffensive, 3 full air wings, over 100 aircraft in total. I stood on a high platform, flanked by my generals. A sound amplification system carried my voice across the entire field and even into the distant capital city. Soldiers of a republic, my voice thundered. 1 month ago, on our own soil, we passed judgment on the gods who saw us as nothing more than insects. We used their divine blood to honor the memory of our countless fallen countrymen. But that is not enough. The masterminds have not yet faced justice. The high and mighty leaders of the Empyrean who allowed and even encouraged all of this are still hiding in their lairs, thinking we don't dare to come and settle the score. Today, I tell you, and I tell the world, I drew the ceremonial sword at my waist and pointed it to the heavens, in the direction of the Empyrean. All blood debts will be paid in blood. It doesn't matter where the enemy is, whether it's in the deepest abyss or the highest heaven. If it won't come to us, we will go to them. We fight this war for one reason, so that humanity will never again have to live on its knees. Target, the Empyrean. Move out. Hua, hua, hua. The ground troops let out a deafening roar. In the sky, the engines of all the Talon aircraft ignited simultaneously, emitting a deep, powerful hum. Blue flames erupted from their thrusters, the powerful downdraft kicking up clouds of dust. First air wing, take off. Second air wing, take off. Third air wing, escort formation, take off. Following the commander's orders, the Talon jets shot into the sky like arrows, quickly forming massive attack formations that blotted out the sun. On the ground, large transport aircraft also began to lift off, their bay doors opening to deploy ropes. Elite ground troops began to board in a swift, orderly fashion. Their mission was to airdrop and secure key divine strongholds after the Air Force had established air superiority. I boarded the flagship, the Ascendant, an aerial fortress larger than the Talons, equipped with superior firepower and command and control systems. This massive combined arms force, carrying the fury and hope of humanity, advanced majestically toward the part of the sky invisible to mortal eyes, the hidden realm of the gods, the Empyrean. After passing through a thick layer of clouds and crossing some kind of invisible barrier, the scene before us opened up dramatically. The celestial palaces and auspicious clouds of imagination were nowhere to be seen. Instead, we were greeted by a scene of utter devastation. Broken, floating mountains drifted crookedly in the air, the once magnificent palaces upon them, now mostly ruins. The rainbow bridges that should have been shimmering with light were shattered and dark. The air was filled with the smell of burning and decay, and the residual divine energy was chaotic and thin. This was the result of my daily special deliveries over the past month. The lingering radiation and the effects of massive explosions had clearly dealt a catastrophic blow to this realm, which depended on the power of faith to sustain itself. Report, Mr. President. Faint divine energy signatures detected ahead, believed to be a celestial patrol. The report came through the comms from scout plane. Small numbers, scattered formation. It seems their command structure has all but collapsed. My chief of staff analyzed at my side. Fire at will. Leave none alive. I ordered. A few salvos of cannon fire quickly turned the low-level gods to dust. The transports descended, deploying the ground troops. From there, it was a steamroll. We cut through any resistance like a hot knife through butter. Even when we encounter high-level gods, we could simply tie them down with a portion of our forces while the main army pushed forward. Before long, we arrived at the palace of the architect himself, the Celestial Spire. Outside the spire, the warlord Kale, with several hundred gods, stood guard, their last line of defense. Warlord, you've finally shown yourself, I said coldly, looking down at him from the Ascendant. Kale, the warlord, pointed his massive greatsword at me. You vile mortals. Today, I will ensure none of you leave this place alive. Is that so? Let's find out. I ordered without ceremony. Engage. The war machine roared to life once more. In the sky, the Talon fighters unleashed a dense barrage of missiles and precision cannon fire, aimed squarely at Kale and the gods behind him. The ground troops' heavy artillery opened up simultaneously, shells raining down from above. Kale roared, swinging his greatsword, each slash unleashing a wave of destructive energy born of pure, mad fury. Several talons that couldn't evade in time were blown out of the sky. He even tried to attack the Ascendant directly, screaming, "I'll kill you! I'll kill you, you pathetic insect who leads this rebellion." However, his madness was futile against our overwhelming firepower and tactical discipline. Our strategy was clear: avoid direct confrontation. Use our range and numbers to wear him down bit by bit. The battle was brutal and efficient. The gods fell one after another. Kale was powerful but reckless, each of his powerful swings often hitting nothing but air or destroying insignificant targets. His strength was rapidly draining. The wounds on his body multiplied, his armor shattered, and his expression grew more and more unhinged. Finally, after sacrificing a few dozen aircraft and over 100 elite soldiers, he made a critical mistake. Now, maximum power containment net. Saturation bombing with tranquilizer rounds. Fire, I commanded. Several massive energy nets and hundreds of specialized tranquilizer shells hit him almost simultaneously. Kale let out a final, furious roar of defiance, struggling against the nets, which sparked and tore under his incredible strength. But the prolonged battle and the effect of the sedatives finally took their toll. The madness in his eyes was replaced by a physiological haze. At last, the completely crazed warlord collapsed, where he was bound by layer upon layer of special chains. Though he still let out unconscious roars, he was no longer a threat. Secure him. Apply the highest level inhibitors. I ordered coldly. I wasn't going to kill him here. Countless families had been destroyed because of him. I would take him back to the execution ground and kill him in front of my people. Soldiers quickly moved in, fitting him with more restraining devices. With the final obstacle removed, I disembarked from the Ascendant. Flanked by an elite guard, I crossed the plaza of ruins and divine blood, walking step by step toward the grand, though damaged, doors of the celestial spire. The doors opened silently. At the far end of the hall, on a simple jade throne, sat a lone figure. He wore simple imperial robes. He did not look old. In fact, he looked strangely young, but his eyes were as deep as the ancient cosmos, filled with an endless fatigue and an indescribable loneliness. He was the architect. He didn't look at me. His gaze seemed to pierce through the roof of the hall, staring at some distant point in the void. I walked to the center of the hall and stopped. My Aegis soldiers quickly fanned out, their rifles aimed warily at the surroundings and at the architect. "You've come," the architect said, his voice surprisingly calm. There was no anger, no fear, not even surprise, as if he had known all along that I would come. His gaze finally fell upon me, a complex look of scrutiny, curiosity, and even a faint hint of admiration. I met his gaze without flinching. "I've come to demand justice for the billions of lives lost due to the selfishness and indifference of you gods." The architect sighed, a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "Why must you do this? To start such a catastrophe, to slaughter the gods. Even if you win, what will you change? The collapse of order may only lead to greater chaos." Why? I was enraged by his casual, detached tone. "You rule the gods, yet you allowed Raynor, the river god, Kale, and all those other bastards to wreak havoc on the mortal realm. You let them abandon their duties for their personal dramas, treating my people like disposable props. What kind of ruler are you? If you won't govern, I will. If you are incompetent, then I will take your place." Faced with my furious questions, the architect did not get angry. The weariness in his eyes only deepened. "You oversimplify things. It's not that I didn't want to intervene. I couldn't. I scoffed. "What do you mean, couldn't? You are the supreme ruler of 3 realms. Who could possibly restrain you? What restrains me is not a specific entity." The architect's gaze grew distant again. "It is the rules. It is causality. It is the way this universe operates. The gods are not born from nothing. We were born from the beliefs of living beings, and we are bound by them. A god's power comes from faith, and a god's mind will reflect the thoughts of the faithful. Extreme faith gives rise to extreme emotions, both positive and negative. These so-called personal dramas to some extent, are the passionate emotions of mortals, projected and amplified onto the gods. To forcibly suppress them would not solve the root problem. It might even cause a greater backlash. All I could do was guide and balance, to try and influence things subtly over the long eons. His words were filled with a profound sense of powerlessness. Absurd. I didn't believe a word of it. So, according to you, it's all humanity's fault? Our suffering is our own doing? That is the most pathetic excuse for shirking responsibility I have ever heard. All I see are gods who enjoyed our worship, but failed to provide protection. All I see are fields of corpses and people living in misery. Today, I will end this twisted era. I will destroy your decrepit divine race and reshape the order of heaven and earth. The architect looked at me and, after a long silence, slowly shook his head. He looked at me as if I were a naive, impetuous child. And if you destroy the gods, then what? The universe requires someone to maintain order. If you destroy the old gods today, new gods will be born from the new beliefs of mortals tomorrow. It's a never-ending cycle. The lives of gods are too long. Long enough for any original purpose to be forgotten. Long enough for any passionate emotion to sour or become twisted. Perhaps that is the price of eternity. His words seemed to carry a dark magic, revealing a hopeless, repeating cycle. But I will not be swayed. Then there will be no more gods, I declared, raising my hand. The soldiers behind me took a step forward in unison, the sound of their rifles being armed echoing in the hall. If order inevitably leads to corruption, then I will build an era that does not require the meddling of gods. The affairs of humanity will be handled by humans. The architect looked at me, and for the first time, a faint, complex smile appeared on his face. It was a smile of resignation, of relief, and perhaps even a hint of anticipation. So, it is possible to not have gods. But he quickly seemed to remember something and shook his head. No, you cannot do it. You cannot kill all the gods in the world. We'll see about that. I had lost all patience, my killing intent boiling over. Ready. However, before I could give the order to attack, something strange happened. The architect on the jade throne began to emit a soft, yet rapidly intensifying light. His body started to disintegrate from the edges, like a sand sculpture in the wind, dissolving into motes of pure light that floated upwards. He didn't resist. He didn't struggle. The last look he gave me was one of complete, peaceful release. Perhaps you can do it, were his last words, carried on a faint, almost inaudible sigh. Then his entire figure dissolved into the light, leaving nothing behind. He had dispersed his own divine soul. He had killed himself. I was stunned. So were my soldiers. We had been prepared for a fight to the death, but we never expected our final opponent to end things this way. What did his last words, his last look mean? Release? Anticipation? A sense of unease and frustration welled up inside me, but I forced it down. No matter what, the core of the Empyrean had been destroyed. Clean up the rest. Take control of the Empyrean. Any who resist are to be terminated. I suppressed the strange feeling in my heart and gave the cold order. The war entered its final phase. With the architect and the warlord gone, the resistance in the Empyrean completely collapsed. Over the next few days, my army swept through the realm, annihilating any gods who dared to fight back. The once glorious divine domain was reduced to ruins and scorched earth. Then, I took the heavily sealed Warlord Kale and returned to the mortal realm. Execution Ground 1 was once again filled with a massive crowd. This time, the atmosphere was even more fervent. They were here to witness the public execution of the legendary warlord. Kale was bound to a pillar with massive runic chains. Though weakened, his eyes were still defiant as he glared at me. Warlord Kale, you abandoned your duty for personal reasons, allowing the Shadow King to slaughter millions. Do you admit your guilt? I demanded. To the victor go the spoils. There's nothing more to say. Kale roared. My only regret is not crushing you insects when I had the chance. Still unrepentant. Execute him. I wasted no more words and gave the order. The latest model of Godslayer cannon was rolled out. Its barrel began to glow with a terrifying energy as it locked onto Kale's head. Fire. Boom! A massive beam of energy instantly engulfed Kale. However, an incredible thing happened. Just as the beam was about to annihilate him, an invisible yet impossibly strong barrier materialized, blocking the god-killing blast. When the light faded, Kale, though bleeding from the mouth and clearly having taken a massive hit, was still alive. The barrier shimmered with an ancient, profound energy. What? My pupils contracted. Kale himself was stunned for a moment, then burst into maniacal laughter. Ha ha! The architect was right. The world protocol forbids it. You mortals can never kill an ancient god. Ha ha ha! The world protocol? The fundamental rules of the world were protecting him? I instantly recalled the architect's last words. And if you destroy the gods, then what? You cannot do it. This is what he meant. The warlord was a personification of some rule, or possessed a cannot-be-killed trait granted by the protocol itself. So that's why the architect couldn't truly punish him, only try to balance and guide him. A crushing sense of frustration and rage almost consumed me. After paying such a heavy price and coming so far, I couldn't even kill the main culprit. Just as I was about to order my men to fire relentlessly, the long silent system notification sounded in my head, this time with an unprecedented gravity. Ding! Host has encountered a world-level fundamental rule obstruction, protocol protection. Special hidden redemption item unlocked. The protocol breaker one-time use. Description: can temporarily tear through the world's fundamental rule barrier, inflicting absolute annihilation on a target protected by the rules. After use, the protocol breaker will be permanently destroyed, and it will consume all of the host's current prestige points. Warning: use of this item may trigger unpredictable backlash from the world's rules. Do you wish to redeem it? All of my prestige points. I glanced at my system interface. It was an astronomical number, the sum total of my conquest of the Empyrean, the slaughter of gods, and the salvation of humanity. It was the foundation for building a new world. But I looked at Kale's gloating smile, at the hopeful and now confused faces of my people below, at the souls of the soldiers who had died in the war, who seemed to be watching from the heavens. There was no hesitation. Redeem it, I roared in my mind. Redemption successful. All prestige points consumed. Remaining prestige points, 0. The protocol breaker has been delivered to the system inventory. A strange, ancient-looking spike, made of neither metal nor wood, its surface covered in flowing, microscopic runes of light, appeared in my mind's eye. It had no powerful energy signature, yet it radiated a soul-chilling aura that seemed to touch upon the very source of existence. I materialized it in my hand. It was cold to the touch. As everyone watched, I walked toward Kale, holding the protocol breaker. Kale's laughter died in his throat. He felt a primal fear, a fear that came from the depths of his soul, emanating from the seemingly ordinary spike in my hand. What? What are you doing? It's useless. The protocol protects. He roared, his voice betraying his terror. I said nothing. I just walked up to him, ignoring the invisible barrier of the world protocol, and slowly raised the protocol breaker. The barrier that had stopped the Godslayer cannon was like butter before a hot knife, silently tearing and melting away before the spike. No! Kale screamed in absolute despair. Without a moment's hesitation, I plunged the protocol breaker into his heart. There was no earth-shattering explosion, no blinding light. His body went rigid, his eyes instantly losing all light. Then, starting from his heart, his divine body, his divine soul, began to silently and completely disintegrate, like a pencil drawing being erased. This time, no power could stop it. The mighty warlord, body and soul, was utterly destroyed. The entire execution ground fell into a dead silence. Everyone was stunned into speechlessness by this incomprehensible event. Then, a deafening euphoric roar of celebration erupted, piercing the clouds. It was the joy of a people who had finally thrown off their last shackle. And I stood there, the protocol breaker in my hand, turning to dust and vanishing. Feeling the empty void where my prestige points used to be, and watching the cheering crowd, I knew that an old era had ended. A new era, one without the shadow of the gods, with an unknown future entirely in the hands of humanity, had begun. The architect might have been right. The cycle might be hard to break, but so what? I, Alexander Thorne, a soul from another world, president of humanity, would lead my people down a path of our own making. Even if the road ahead was filled with thorns, I had no regrets. Epilogue. The celebration of the warlord's execution lasted for 3 days and nights. The capital was alive with lights and revelry, as if to permanently banish the shadow of the gods that had loomed for millennia. Even the White House, though more restrained, was filled with an unprecedented air of relief and joy. I stood alone by the window of the Oval Office, looking at the distant city lights, feeling a strange sense of emptiness. The great enemy was defeated, divine authority had collapsed, and humanity was more united and hopeful than ever. Though my prestige points were gone, with the Republic's current level of technology and unity, the future was bright. Everything seemed perfect. As I was lost in thought, the familiar, emotionless electronic voice of the system sounded in my mind. Ding! The current world system of divine faith has completely collapsed. All major culpable deities have been executed. Humanity's independent consciousness has been fully awakened. Host's mission, defy heaven and change humanity's fate, is complete. Rating perfect. As per the initial protocol, the system will now detach from the host in 1 hour to find its next suitable candidate. Thank you for your cooperation and effort. We wish you all the best in this world. The system was leaving? I suddenly spoke, my voice soft, as if talking to myself, or perhaps to the entity in my mind. Thank you, Alexander. There was only silence in my head. The electronic voice seemed to have frozen. After a good 5 or 6 seconds, it finally spoke again, still trying to maintain its mechanical tone, but failing to hide the emotion underneath. Why does the host say that? This system's designation is Prestige, not Alexander. I turned, walked to my desk, poured myself a glass of now cold water, took a sip, and then said slowly, it's just a guess. Something fell off from the very beginning. That blood ritual to summon the rain god. I later went through the original's memories and the old state archives. That rite of sovereignty, while costly, was never meant to be a fatal ritual. It was more of an expression of ultimate will, a plea to the cosmic order itself, not a sacrifice to a specific god. So, did the original Alexander Thorne really die? If he didn't die, how did my soul take over his body? And what was this system that appeared at just the right moment? I put down the glass, my gaze seeming to pierce through space to that unseen entity. That ritual, it wasn't meant to summon Rainer the Stormcaller. It was meant to summon the world protocol itself, wasn't it? The system was silent again, this time for much longer. Finally, the voice returned. It was no longer a cold, mechanical tone, but the voice of a young man, filled with an endless weariness, yet also a hint of release. It sounded similar to the original Alexander's voice, but far more ancient. You're even more perceptive than I thought. You were indeed the right choice. He had admitted it. Yes, I am Alexander Thorne, the voice said calmly, as if narrating a story from long ago. Or rather, what's left of him. I am the last remnant of his soul, fused with a sliver of power granted by the World Protocol, manifested as this so-called system. Many years ago, after I took office, I noticed the gods were changing. They grew more and more indifferent to the mortal realm, lost in their own emotional dramas and power games. Our prayers became harder to answer, their responses more perfunctory, and often their personal affairs brought disaster upon us. I was furious, but helpless. The power of the gods was far beyond mortals. Their very existence was like a law of nature. The great drought that began 3 years ago was the final straw. I prayed to every god I could, tried every method, but got no response. I watched my people die on the scorched earth, and I finally made my decision. I used the oldest and most dangerous secret right of my office to offer my entire life, soul, and destiny as a sacrifice, not to any specific god, but as a desperate plea and protest directly to the cosmic world protocol itself. I succeeded, and I failed. Alexander's voice was tinged with bitterness. I did make contact with the protocol, but it told me it was also powerless. Our world had long been overlaid and suppressed by a higher-level protocol from another plane of existence. That protocol was not born of nature, but was the creation of some supreme being, a narrative, a story. Our world, everyone in it, gods, demons, humans, we were all just characters and settings in that story. Our joys and sorrows, to that higher power, were perhaps just plot points. Under the influence of this narrative protocol, the gods' behavior would unconsciously drift toward dramatic conflict and emotional catharsis, which is why there were so many ridiculously love-addled and romantically conflicted deities. The original world protocol was suppressed, its rules twisted. It couldn't directly intervene or even punish the gods who strayed from their duties, because in the logic of the story, their actions were probably considered reasonable. I was shaken to my core. I had suspected something, but the truth was far beyond my imagination. We had been living in a world confined by the framework of a story. What did the original protocol do? It told me it couldn't change things directly, but it could use the immense energy and coordinates from my sacrifice to summon a variable from the source of that higher-level narrative, a soul from reality, who might be able to break this predetermined fate. And so you arrived. And the prestige points? The modern equipment. The prestige points were a manifestation of the old protocol's remaining power, a way to quantify your contribution to changing the world's fate. The modern weapons and equipment weren't physically transported here. They were conceptual constructs created by the old protocol by expending its own energy based on the memories and knowledge in your soul. You can think of it as a high-level form of replication and projection based on the existing rules of this world. And the final protocol breaker, I asked, already guessing the answer. Alexander's voice grew heavy. That was the old protocol's final act. It saw your success. It saw hope, but it also saw the ultimate obstacle set by the narrative protocol. The immortality attribute of the Warlord Kale was a hard-coded rule of the story. To break it required a collision of equal power. So the old protocol chose self-destruction. It condensed the last of its core rules into that protocol breaker, and in an act of mutual annihilation, it forcibly tore through the protective rule the narrative protocol had placed on Kale. The warlord died, and the old protocol faded away completely. Silence filled the Oval Office. I stood speechless for a long time. So the price of that spike that killed the warlord was not just all of my prestige points, but also the self-sacrifice of a world protocol. So from now on, I began slowly. From now on, Alexander's voice was filled with relief and the ethereal quality of fading away. This world is truly free from the framework of the story, and it has also lost the direct protection of the old protocol. It is a truly free world, one that you must all explore and protect on your own. The future is entirely up to you, to every single person living on this land. My mission is also truly complete. This last wisp of my soul, it's time for it to dissipate. I could feel the presence in my mind rapidly weakening. Thank you, I said again, with sincere gravity, this time to the original Alexander Thorne. Thank you for everything you did. No, it is I who should thank you. Thank you for accomplishing the wish that neither I nor the old protocol could fulfill. His voice grew fainter, like a candle in the wind. I leave this world in your hands. And I'm sorry for dragging you into this. The voice faded into nothing. The familiar system interface in my mind dissolved like smoke, leaving no trace. I stood there for a long time. Outside the window, the first light of dawn was breaking through the darkness, illuminating a new capital city, a city no longer living under the shadow of gods. The road ahead was unknown, and there would surely be new challenges. But this time, destiny was truly in our own hands. The end.